It is June 13th, and we are here for our Infinite Wisdom gathering with the wonderful, amazing Levi. And I am really looking forward to introducing you to him. He, as I mentioned in my email, he and I got to sit down on a bus ride and have a deep chat. And when I heard his story, I practically fell out of my chair. It's amazing. And I'm not going to, as I said, I'm not going to take his thunder away. So, Levi, thank you so much for joining us from Utah, right?
Yes.
You're in Utah. And he just did a long drive home from Sedona just the other day. So here he is in his shop. And so welcome, my friend. So good of you to join us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Welcome. I'm happy to be here. I'm excited. I'm excited to share, whatever infinite wisdom that I can share that I've learned along the way. So
Excellent. So Levi is wearing, by the way, the mala beads that we got in India. Yes. And Levi had so many of them at one point, you could almost not see his neck. He had so many on. And the thing is, Beverly and I would say, aren't these heavy? Like we can only wear them for a short amount of time. But there you are with
it felt
You're
cool.
Malaed up, mister.
I was. Yes. It was funny because I was wearing that, and every time I get back online, everybody would see another necklace on. They're like, man, we didn't know if it was going to go past your head or.
So, exactly. Yeah. There's no such thing as too many malas, I guess.
Yeah. Well, there were gifts for everybody, but I just was wearing.
I know. Well, you carry it well. All right. So, Levi, let's begin at the beginning, because I want people to hear your story, and then we will get to the topic of forgiveness, either along the way or afterwards. So let's just go back and tell us where you come from. Tell us about your family and the area you grew up in.
Yeah. So I grew up in rural Utah. I was born in a town called Ogden, Utah, which was actually a pretty large city. They had an Air Force base there. My dad was stationed there. But we moved up north about an hour, which was a really little town. And this is in the 80s, like 85. So you got to think 85 Utah, rural Utah, the community is very not cultured. Definitely not cultured. Not cultured, only cultured to one religion, and everything else is just kind of odd and weird. And the property value is so cheap. My dad was like, oh, coming from California, this is amazing. Boom, we go over there. And my mom is from El Salvador. My whole family is, from California. So we were already kind of like the odd family, in the neighborhood, And so, growing up, well, I'm sorry, Give me a question you asked. Tell me about my family.
Well, because and you started off on the right track, because the fact that you guys all had this El Salvadorian influence in your family, and you're moving into a very structured, homogeneous neighborhood. So things started to happen for you as a child.
Yes. So I and this is so when I actually, as a little kid from 85, which puts me at about 5 years old, to about 5 years into that, till about 10, I'm catching frogs, building tree houses. I'm your kid, fishing. I loved fishing. I was your typical kid. But as we started to move in, and I guess more into the to the teenager state, and I started liking girls, and I started having friends, and I started to bring fears into even my father's, view coming from California, and my mom came from El Salvador, and in that time in the 80s, they're coming out of a revolution, and gangs have have just eradicated El Salvador. And El Salvador, if you know anything about El Salvador, has one of the worst gangs in the world called MS-13. Like literally, there's documentation on it. They say it's the most violent. They'll kill your whole family. They'll kidnap your children. I mean, it does not matter. You know what I'm saying? And they come from my mom's country. It's so crazy. And when you see these people, they're covered in tattoos and they have like horns and sticks. They worship the devil. And they're just like really, really into the dark. And my mom, you know, and the idea of tattooing and stuff like that, I only bring up tattoos for certain thing, you know, like that's one of the reasons why you don't really see tattoos on me, is because I didn't want to represent like one of the greatest things in my mom's beard. My mom, you know, my grandma, they came over to this country, you know, they had to make a trek, you know, and I learned about my grandmother's trek to this country. And they came over with the coyotes. And there's a whole deep story to it. And as I learned it more and more, is one of the factors that helped change my life. So, but going back to being a youth, I became very, they say, there's a very good saying, they say being a white kid in a rural community, and not to, you know, segregate colors or anything like that, but in a rural community, especially in the 90s, growing up with, let's say, ADD, and I've always had like an ADD like effect to myself, if you would. I was really curious and always like distracted mentally, you know? And they say if you're a white kid with ADD, well, you need help. But if you're a minority kid with ADD, well, you're a delinquent youth and you need to get locked up. You know what I mean? And that's actually what happened. And it was so crazy. I remember I was like 12 years old. I was a big time artist, right? And I was just, you know, it was just like this era, 1292. It was like the year that like the hip hop era was coming out, and everybody was like, it was like a big thing. And, you know, we understand that culture is a big thing for children, you know, and I'm a child. So what am I being influenced by, you know? And I remember I was an artist, and I remember the school cop knew I was a really good artist, and they came in and they said, hey, we want you to do something for us. Would you draw us a logo for our new gang unit that we're creating? And so I remember I drew them this logo, you know, for their gang unit. Well, a year later, the gang unit was taking me away, and they were wearing this shirt with the logo that I drew for them.
What?
Yeah. Most craziest thing. You know,
so you're saying the gang actually took the logo that the police
the gang unit, they made this gang unit in a town that had no gangs. So you have to think about this. They make a gang unit, they have to get funding for this gang unit, and now it's like, well, where are the gangsters? So they start looking for minority youth, and there I am. And they're like, dude, this delinquent child, we need, and I was like getting in fights in school, and things started to go south, and I started to headbutt my father. Now my father was a single child, you know, he grew up, he's a German, Polish, with a little bit of Irish blood, growing up in Daly City, California, which is the Bay Area. And at that time, it was dominant, like white communities. And my dad grew up really to give you a little idea of how my dad grew up, his father, which is my grandfather, when my dad met my mother, he went and cleared the safe and was like, I'll give you $60,000. Now, this is in the 80s. To not marry this woman, you need to marry a German woman. You can't marry out of our bloodline. So this is what they believe, though, coming from Germany, you know? And so, like, today we call that racism, you know what I'm saying? But my dad chose my mom, so he was outcasted from my grandfather and got nothing. So my dad had nothing, he had no siblings, he had nothing. He was like on this journey by himself, you know? And so I know that, like, being this kid that I was, and I started to like be so opposite, I think he got scared, and he didn't know how to like contain me. And so it was a little bit of abuse that started happening, and I started to run away from home. And this was like the catalyst for them to say, enough is enough. And they took me away and they put me into foster care into a thing called a Proctor program, which was for juvenile delinquents. And my first, like, I was 13 going on 14 years old. And I remember being in court, and they were like, oh, Your Honor, because they were saying, well, he has a mother who's home all the time and she can watch him. It's like, Your Honor, his mom can't even speak English, and she is deaf in both ears. She's 60% deaf in both ears. She is not qualified to mother this child because I was just like too wild or whatever, you know. And so they took me away, and there I went, you know. And I remember my first foster care that I went into. It was like this. Well, they ended up being meth dealers, but I didn't know that time. Matter of fact, I had never been involved with drugs. You know, I didn't even see drugs till they took me away. And then it was like the first introduction to like real life scenarios. And they didn't even care. There was not a care in the world about me. It was like I had 3 other foster brothers in there, and each of them was, because I was the youngest, I was 14. And actually 13 going on 14. So, and my mindset is like small town boy mindset. Mind you, I've only been in like a little rural part of Utah. So I never seen big city life. All these guys they had tattoos. I was like, oh my gosh, who are these guys? And they were all thugs. They were all from different gangs from the Salt Lake area. And if you know anything about Utah, Utah actually had a really bad gang problem throughout the 90s, all the way to the 2000s. And it wasn't until the mid 2000s that literally the ATF and the feds came in and started giving the RICO Act to different gangs, excuse me, which is the same act that they gave to the mafia to bring down the mafia. So the only reason why I'm saying that is because it was a problem over here. Even though Utah is Utah, it was an actual problem. And it's totally different now. Utah is a totally different place. I don't even know if it's like that anymore. I don't think so at all, but they definitely had to do a lot of work to make that happen. But in that, I was highly influenced, and, you know, being taken away from my family. And not only that, I was raised under a religion, and I don't like to denote religion or even talk about religion too tough, but the problem with that is that a lot of times the ideology of the parents, the family, the community, it's all based and really structured tight within whatever religious base that might be. And because of that, you get judged according to that. And even I judged myself according to it, because I was birthed into this religion. I only knew that from the day I was born. Like, everything that they believed is what I believed, you know? And so when I was out on my own and I was a boy stripped away from my family, I hated everything, and I hated myself, because I was like, oh, how could I ruin, you know, like everything? And God doesn't love me because I believe that God was a man, you know, like it doesn't matter. But either way, I just became a really angry child. And the music of that culture was very in the hip hop, was this gangster hip hop, and it was me against the world. And I had this ideology, and I was angry, and I knew I had to be strong. And the only thing I saw that was strong were like these thugs. And I said it, I could be like tough like these guys, like no one would ever hurt me, you know what I'm saying? And so I became that, you know. And it's like, we have the ability to manifest anything we want, you know. And it's just like, as a child, I was so misdirected by this. And so I used this was the persona that I created, and it led me down a path that literally was led me down a path that led me into like the deepest parts of prison. Eventually, by the time I was 17 years old, I was involved in a gang related shooting, and I was just a participant in it. And that led me to my first incarceration as an adult. And I remember, like, I was in the news, and my family found out from the news that happened. Yeah, and I was like an embarrassment to my family. But yeah, like I had to think about it, you know, like I had to think about it, like my mom. You know, I just like, oh my God, everything that she had done up to this point to try to like, my mom, she's a Salvadorian. She came from El Salvador at like 24. She came to this country, and she's like a really big, like, into religion. And regardless, though, you know, she never allowed religion to take the love she had for her son away. You know, even though other families would just like denote their family if they didn't act accordingly, you know, they would literally cut ties with their son or their whoever it was, that it became outcasts. You know, I saw that happen a lot in the smaller communities. And my mom, you know, like even in my dad's like confusion, and like I would run away from home and I was like staying at a friend's house, my mom used to like find me, and she would come bring me pupusas. I don't know if you guys know pupusas, but my mom's So she would make those, and my grandma recently passed, but they would come find me. My grandma, she was like a gangster. So like no matter what I did wrong and my dad hated me, my grandma would always tell my mom, like, no matter what, we never like outcast our son, you know what I'm saying? No matter what. And my dad was really confused, my dad didn't know how to raise me, so I had to, that was a whole journey, healing journey in itself, just me and my father's relationship. But at this time, I hated my father. You know what I mean? I absolutely hated my father. And my mom, when I say my mom used to come find me, because my dad couldn't know that she came and found me. Because my dad was like disliked me so much that I was like, you better not go find that kid. And so she had to sneak and come bring me food and stuff like that. And so, and I was a rebel kid. I definitely was not perfect. I was just a rebel kid. I was confused and I was really angry. And once I was in the system, there was no going back home. So it wasn't until they released you, until they decided that you qualified to go back home. So this was like a really ongoing circle of like, and I'm so filled with hate and misdirection at this point that I think like for the remaining of my life, I'm going to be a gang member. I literally thought that, very destructive, and going into prison.
I want to take a moment,
Yes.
Levi, and all of us on this call who know how to do the infinity wave, let us please wave Levi, because this is so raw. Even though you're many years past it, it's still raw, it still strikes a chord. And so we're just gonna wave you. What that means is from our hearts to your heart, there's a big figure 8 made of flowing water coming, like I taught you in Nepal. And it is full of a very high octane, high frequency love and compassion. And we just want to give that to you here for a few moments. We so appreciate you telling us this story. Really do.
That's amazing.
It works, right?
Yeah, I actually could feel something.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I can totally feel even my energy levels, I totally like just calmed down,
Yeah.
And that's where I'm at in my life, to where I can actually recognize that now. Before, in all that past as a child, your mind's running at 1,000 miles an hour. Give them the child ADD too. I had ADD, I really do. I've always had it, but it's been the biggest blessing of my life, because I have to make a conscious choice to stay focused. I have to make a conscious choice to be present. If I was just naturally present, maybe I'd take it for granted. I don't know. But because I'm not, and sometimes my thoughts and the negative thoughts, especially as a child coming up, this is why when I told my story of Clint and them, and they talked about that. But I think we're moving to that. I think
Okay, we are. So just so you know, my son, my husband, both ADD, ADHD. I raised an ADHD son. I became a neurofeedback practitioner to help them. And then other people, a lot of people have this. And so I really feel for you. And I also want to say that I went to a brain conference once where this wonderful man, Tom Hartman, had written a book called I think it's the Edison gene. It's a wonderful book you might want to look up. And he talks about how the ADD gene is the one responsible for us having all the breakthroughs. They're the ones out on the front prow of the boat, sailing across the ocean. They're the ones in the jets testing them at, warp speed. Those are the ADD people. And without them, we would be stuck in the mud way back. So there's a lot of benefit and and a ton of creativity. They're out of the box thinkers. So let's just keep that in mind as a reframe,
Yes,
as we go
I
forward.
love that.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. That makes me so happy. I
Good.
knew it was a special power. I knew
It
it was.
is, it
But
is.
you have to control it though. It's like, you know what I mean? So meditation is really
Well,
good,
meditation is great for it, and becoming aware and mindful as you are is absolutely fantastic. That's going to get you through. All right, let's go to prison.
Yes.
All right,
So
and
I when I end up going to prison for a gang related drive-by shooting that I was involved with at 17 years old. And the people that were in my car, it's so crazy. And even to this day, and I actually didn't, I had to remember this, what I'm about to tell you. I've never actually got into a gang, but I was a full-on gang member. I know that sounds crazy because I rolled with them so tight and they were such my friends. And then when the cops came, they just certified me as a gang member and they charged me as such. But in the end of all this cycle, I wasn't even actually from the gang. So anyways, but going to prison helped like at least build that persona to try to be a gang member, because that's all it did. When I initially went to prison, I was in there scared, honestly, scared. And through fear, I was attracted to the toughest dudes. So I knew I had to be strong. The toughest dudes were the meanest dudes. And so I developed a persona and I developed an attitude. And by the time I got out on my first stint, I was actually 21, 22 years old. So I was 22 years old and I came out just like, I'm a real gangster now. I'm going to show these guys what a real gangster is. That was my mentality. I couldn't believe it. And in some way, I thought I could walk two walks. Like I could walk the walk that would make my family happy, and I could still be who I am because this is what life has brought me to. You know what I mean? And there's a lot of confusion when there's confusion. When you're in darkness, there is confusion. And obviously I was hard on my journey in the wrong direction, which is so divine because it just got deeper. I needed it to get deeper, and I was out for about 2.5 years, about 2 years. And one day I was about to get off parole. I had about 6 months to get off what's called supervised release in the federal department, but it's parole. And I had, yes, not supervised. This is parole, excuse me. I just had two things mixed up. And my PO pulls up one night and he searches my car and he finds a gun because I'm a gang member. And the gang that I'm running with was actually in a war with another gang and people were actually dying. And I was choosing to live this life. I don't know what was the testosterone levels were too high. I don't know what was going on. But for some reason, I was just like, it was like this need for this toxic, and this level of toxicness could have took my life away. And it did take other people's lives away. And I'm grateful that I didn't actually participate in taking anyone's life away. I probably wouldn't be here right now, or deserve to be here right now. But in that, the Fed, they found a gun in my car because of my prior offense. They upped my charges and they sent me to the federal government. The federal government was able to convict me, and I end up going to federal prison. Because of my prior gang offense, I went to one of the worst prisons in the nation. I went to what's called the United States Penitentiary, Florence, Colorado. Or United States Penitentiary, there's only 11 in the nation, and they're all high maximum securities. This is for the federal government. And I didn't know because I had been in the gang unit in Utah State Prison, and I thought that was some type of umph and glory in some way. And not even to realize it till I get into this maximum security prison and realize that I just came from Camp Snoopy, and these were the real killers. Now, in Florence, Colorado, there was about 87% had more than one life sentence. So just to give you the mindset of the people in there, it was like militant. And I'm talking about I remember when I first got there, I saw someone from Utah that I knew, and I was like, "Hey!" My face kind of lit up. I had emotional expression. He had no expression when he saw me, and he was like, "Hey," and his voice was very monotone. He's like, "Come here," and he started to what's called game me up. So he broke down all the ways everything ran. And I was like, "Why is everybody's energy just like, really like?" Oh, it seemed dull, you know? And you fast forward about 90 days, that place was so violent that I remember, and this is how I knew that every human adapts to their environment. It's just how it works. 90, not even 90 days. I might have been there 60 days. And I get on the phone, I call one of my family members. And when they answered, they were so excited to talk to me. And normally I'm so excited to talk to them. But this time, I was that monotone dude with no emotional expression. And I was like, hey, look, it's really serious up in here. I can't even be too loud. And it was like, and I was like, oh my gosh, I was the guy that I saw. I was like, no way. And I remember like, this is where PTSD starts to develop deep,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And I get out, I did about 7 years. Actually, I did about 7 years. I was supposed to do 4.5 years. And in there, I ran with the hardest of the gangs, you know? I mean, I did. I remember being in there and saying that this was my only chance that I had. And then I knew that I had to remain. See, there's a lot of people don't know, and prison politics is a whole nother subject. But going in there, if I would have went in there as the gang member and then decided, oh my gosh, I committed so much wrong. I shouldn't have done that. Now look where I'm at in prison. You know what? I'm going to change my life right now. And I'm in prison trying to change my life. This is how you get killed. This is actually how, like, you want to now come to prison and change your life? You should have changed your life on the street. So I knew that. So while I was in there, I had to like dive in to being a gang member.
Wow.
And so I went hard as I possibly could. And I said this, if I leave here alive, I will change my life forever. And I will seek a better thing. And that's actually what happened, because I left unscathed, but with so much like information and knowledge. And I didn't know what was yet to come coming out, because coming out of prison 7 years later from a high maximum security prison and being a gang member and running and playing that role, I didn't even know who I was. I didn't even know. I had all these ambitions. I was like, yeah, this hard gang member. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go and talk to some children, and I'm going to get a good job and become a millionaire. I said all these dreams, but I didn't know what my mind state actually was at that time. You think everything is good, but I didn't know. You know, I was in the darkness, and it wasn't until I got out that everything unfolded.
Well, let's talk a little bit about what did unfold in prison.
Yes.
With your art and how that all happened.
Yes. So while I was in prison, oh, did I tell you about how he made?
Yes, you did, and I want to hear all those little details.
Okay, yeah. Well, when I was in prison, when I was in state prison, and I had always, you know, it's so weird how life works, because for most of my life, I was trying to find out what was it that I was going to do, because growing up, you know, there was like, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up? And what I wanted to be when I grew up was a mountain man, because I used to read Davy Crockett and Jim Brizzer books, you know, when I was super young, and it always like glorified my mind. So it was like, yeah, Levi, you want to be a mountain man? There's no money in that. But like, what are you going to sell pelts? Like, though, I don't even know if anybody does that anymore. But anyways, so it was like, you're supposed to want to be an astronaut or somebody, engineer or something, you know? And in that, while I'm like going through life, and even early on when I was 12 years old, I actually gave myself the very first tattoo. But how I did that was I just like accidentally ran into like a guy with a homemade machine, and it inspired me. And I was like, oh, that must be bad, because in the religious family I grew up in, it was considered very wrong. And especially from my mom's point of view, where she came from El Salvador, and all these faces were tattooed, like tattoos were forbidden. So I never really got into it until I was about 12 years old. And one of my friends had a homemade tattoo machine he made with a little train station thing. And that's when I gave my first tattoo. And I got grounded for it, and I was like in super big trouble. But I remember like even getting locked up, I started to learn how to pick, and because I was always an artist, so it was something that I reached for, and it was something that was taboo. And I think I always liked kind of like taboo things or something. I don't know, they interest me. I don't know. Don't touch the fire, Levi. So I burned my hand to severe burns. That was me. But anyway,
That's the ADD.
yeah.
So tell us how you constructed everything you needed in prison to do
Yeah,
a tattoo.
so initially we would take apart, we would get a couple items off commissary that would have a motor in it. One of them was a beard trimmer and another one was a CD player. Now a CD player actually has two motors in it, one that moves the eye back and forth and one that spins the CD. So you actually get a double up on tattoo machines if you get a CD
Two
player.
for one.
The 2-for-1, right? And then we connect the batteries, and all it is a little motor that spins. And on that spindle, we're able to you could take a bottle lid, like from a plastic Coke bottle, and you would break it to where you would just have a round circular piece of plastic, and then you would melt a center hole, and you could stick it on the little arm that comes out the motor, and then so you would have a wheel on it basically, and then you would construct another hole. You would put another hole on one part of the wheel, and this is where the needle would hook in. And so then as the motor turned, it turned like a piston. That's exactly how it looked. And it would go up and down a barrel, which would just be the big pen tube and barrel. And we would get the needles from actually guitar string. We literally would get them from the guitar room. We'd steal, actually I'd buy it. I would always buy everything. Someone else would steal it and I'd buy it from them. And then we would sharpen it. We would have to hand sharpen it. And so we would hand sharpen every needle via an emery board. And in professional hand tattooing, so the reason why I was so good was because I was always willing to learn and always ask questions. I think it was my ADD, and there was a guy in there, and I didn't do drugs. And there was a guy in there who was a Tecato, which is big time, right? It's a heroin addict. But the heroin pieces they get are really little. And yes, people can overdose in there, but they only get like little chips of heroin at a time. So they just stay in their little heroin world. There's really not enough to like be ODing on heroin in there. They wish. A lot of those guys probably wish they could OD on heroin or whatever, but they don't have enough, and is disgusting. That whole drug world in prison's disgusting and very scary. But this guy, I don't know why, he had been in there 25 years and he could do heroin, become high on heroin, and literally take a picture and set it on the wall and then tattoo it on someone's skin, almost identical. I don't know what happened in his brain or why that access. And a lot of people, if you look back in history on artists, they were like drug addicts that like opened creativity in them, before they died. Whatever, but anyways, I knew because I didn't do drugs and I was a little bit of a hustler. I would get, and it's crazy because in there, like a piece of heroin would be considered money. And it's so sad to tell you about this on this Hope and Light that I would use heroin as a barter tool, because that's something that's in there. That's what they wanted. And so, yeah. And he would say, bring me a paper of heroin. A paper of heroin was a little piece of heroin. Bring me a paper of heroin. You could sit it on the tattoo. And I was like, all right. So I go get, and he always like, hey, I need a paper of heroin. And he'd always like, come find me because he always needed it, right? So I was like, okay. And I go get it for him. And then I would sit there and he'd teach me every little technique that he had. And I would always watch. And he says, are you having problems with the ink going in the skin? He's like, well, your needle's not sharpened in a round, perfectly round thing. It's just sharpened like as if you took a stick on the ground and went like this. So it has flat spots all over it. So he's like, you need to take an eraser out of a brand new number 2 pencil. You take it out of that little metal casing, and then you feed the needle through the very center of that eraser, and you keep it at the head. So now you have this needle, and you put your finger on the eraser, you put your finger on the tip of the needle, and then the other finger on the eraser, and you roll it along an emery board until it rolls perfectly around like that. Yeah.
Okay, Levi, I just, so do y'all understand the unbelievable, I don't, MacGyver, right? I mean, this is so clever how they're using what they've got. I mean, I was so impressed by this. The big pen, you take the ink out, you've got the thing, and then the needle goes into that. It's unbelievable. And so you started to do these tattoos.
Yes. And really, I remember the story I was telling you. I actually started off as an ink maker inside of prison. Remember, I was telling you, I was made the best ink. I made the darkest ink.
That's right. Talk about the ink. Talk about the ink.
Yeah, okay, I'll tell you about the ink. So when I went to prison initially, I was like, oh, I don't know about tattooing because you get in some big trouble. But at the same time, I didn't really care, you know. But I saw these guys tattooing and I thought that they were just remarkably better than me. So I was like, it'd probably take me a couple years to get good like that. But I was very interested in how they made the ink. And the way they make the ink is they burn oil and collect the soot. And it's the soot in which they knead down into ink. But how they do that is they take a tuna fish can, they take all the tuna out and stuff, and they have the lid and the tuna can, and they use an oil. So whatever oil, I learned that the different weight in oil created a different darkness in the soot. But I learned that on my own. That's how I was able to use a different type of oil where everybody else was using baby oil, which is a very light oil. And like even a coconut oil would be a very light oil. And as that melted down, it burned really fast, created a lot of soot. They got a lot of soot, they were able to make ink. But when I burned olive oil, which is a very heavy oil, and you had to make a really strong fire, and I learned how to do it without blowing the thing up, I was able to make this really dark. I caught it into an ink catcher, which basically is just a trash bag. You literally put the can down with a candle. You make a candle, and how you make the candle is you take all the tuna fish out. You have the lid. You poke a hole in the center of the lid. You take a piece of your cloth, whether it be underwear, t-shirt, or your bedding, something from your bedding, and you make a wick. In that wick, you're going to get it all oiled up, right? And then we had a way of sparking from a light plug a fire. And then we would light the candle. Now, once that started to light, it would start making black smoke. Immediately, you'd have to set it down, and we would take a paper bag that you get from the store, and we would set it on top of it. Now, the only thing is, it's not just that. You had to cut the lip of the paper bag and fold it down. So when you put it underneath, you put it on top of the candle, and then on top of the paper bag, you had to put wet sponges. And literally, it's so weird. Did you know you could cook like an egg in a paper bag? You ever seen that? It's like some Boy Scout stuff. But literally, I would have those sponges sizzling on top of this bag without the bag burning. And it was called a soot collector. And after the can was done burning all the oil, there would be like this cone of soot inside that would scrape out with a poker card into a bag. And then we would start to knead it down into a dough, and then from a dough into a really dense dark ink. And that's how, and I had the best on the yard.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So you started, and then when you came out, let's talk about what happened when you came out.
Yeah. So the thing about, and I'm really thank you for, I didn't expect you to have me explain the process of tattooing in prison, but I do have to say, because of my artistic skill and because I became a tattoo artist and because of who I was, I didn't have a lot of race restrictions. Because of my gang ties, I didn't have race restrictions. My gang is actually Southeast Asian oriented. So I came from an Asian gang group. I grew up with a lot of Orientals. And while I was in there, I didn't have race restrictions. And this allowed me to tattoo on all different races and colors. And everybody knew me because of this. And because of this, I think is the main reason why I didn't get hurt in prison. I was actually like cherished in prison because I was this guy, and I didn't have to be anybody else, just a good tattoo artist, you know what I'm saying? And so it really like saved my life through prison. And I knew that I had that in the books, like when I got out, but still because of my adolescence and because I wanted to make right with my family, I didn't think tattooing would be the option, because growing up the way I grew up, tattooing was forbidden. And it was like, you're not going to be able to enter the kingdom of God if you're a tattoo artist. You're doing Satan's art, or something. I mean, like whatever, right? And in that moment of time in life, it kind of made sense because I saw like my mom's people with the tattoos all over the face and all the like gangs, and it was always negative. It was always just like ugly, right? And so it's like, oh, maybe they're right. So I get out with the idea that I'm going to get a good job and I'm going to do this. I'm going to do all these things. I'm going to go speak to youth. I'm like, I'm going to change my life. I did know that. I'm like, I'm going to change my life. But how can I do it? I had gang ties and stuff like that. And yeah, dude, wow, dude, repeating this story, I'm like, holy mackerel, dude, I can't believe half the stuff I went through, because I'm so far along in life now. And I'm like, whoa, like repeating this. I'm like, really? I was like, just right now when we're at the story, like I get out. And right when I get out, I have to tell you guys this, and I'll say it as fast as I possibly can. Because of my gang ties, which were Southeast Asian, I just told you that. One of the Southeast Asian countries is Vietnam. Well, Vietnam, you have to know politics. Vietnam's tied to China. So inside of prison, the Vietnamese and Chinese roll together. So when I get out, one of my partners from the gang, I'm well now that I did all this time, and I did in a maximum security, I did with all the big dogs. I'm now a big dog. I'm now somebody in the criminal world for these guys. Do you see what I'm saying? So I get out, and that's not what I wanted though. This is not what I signed up for. This is just happening now. The momentum is too strong. It's going in all the wrong directions. So my boy calls me. He's living in the Bay. I transfer out. I have a brother living in the Air Force, in a Beale Air Force Base in Northern California. So I transferred from Utah over to California. And this was the one hope of not going back to the gang, not going back to these things, and starting my life over. And so this is what I wanted, you know? But when I get over there, I realized that me and my brother are two different types of people. He'd been in the military all his life. I've been a gangster in prison. It was like living with a correctional officer or something. And we just did not get along. And one of my boys at that time from the gang, from the old life, he reaches out to me, and he's over in the Bay Area. He's in a richier part outside San Jose that's really nice. He's living in a mansion. He's like, you need to come over here. So I go over there. Now, this is Asian community, and they are living in a mansion. But you know what? I didn't realize at that very moment I got immediately impressed by everything that was going on, that these guys were part of an organized crime family. They were a triad group from out of the Bay Area. I did not know this, but I did know there was some type of involvement because these guys were doing different things. I go out there. They introduced me to a guy who is almost just like me. He had been in prison. He had came to this country. I didn't come to this country. I was born here, but he was a tattoo artist in prison. He didn't run with Asians. He ran with Hispanics. Where I'm a Hispanic, I ran with Asians. We always had the same story. He wings me. He's like, yo, I want you with us. I'm like, okay, I'm really, as you guys said, I'm kind of Muslim, but I'm even bigger then. And I'm a really good fighter. So he like wanted me as his bodyguard, and he's willing to pay me. And I'm like, dude, this is turning out to be a good thing. Woo. About a week later, and I remember he asked me, he's like, hey, what kind of car do you want? And it was so funny. I said, I want an Acura Integra. He's like, what? How about a Mercedes? And I was like, oh, okay. And he never got me a car or anything, but he asked me that question. I didn't know who he was. A week later, he was on the Bay Area news in a tribal pyramid as a Chinese triad group. He was the main leader of this group. I was the first non-Asian in the Chinese tribe. I was in the family. I couldn't believe it. I was like, what? I was like, no. Oh, whoa. Dude, I'm on federal parole right now. I'm like, so I ran away. And I just ghosted those people. And I ghosted him. And I finally, like years later, I talked to one of the main wigs, and I told him, look, man, I'm done with that style of my life. And they let me go, which normally, if I had been actually involved for a long period of time, they probably would have had to kill me. But because I just like a week and a half, 2 weeks in, and I knew the big dog and I actually wasn't involved, they were able to say, all right, man, just don't come back. You know, like, cool, thank you. Yeah. So I was like almost going to be like a mob leader of some sort, probably be dead by now, you know, or in prison forever. I don't know, you know. And I was like, man, I can't do it. I can't go back to the old life. I can't go back to the hustling drugs or do whatever I can, you know, the gangster stuff that gangsters do in the streets. I can't do that. I can't rob people. I don't want to hurt people. I don't want people. I want people to love me for who I am, not because they're scared of me or because I've been in prison for so long. It's like, respect him because he got the stripes, you know. That's not what I was looking for in life. And because I didn't have any direction, I ended up in the streets. I just ended up sleeping in. I ended up homeless in a car. I had a 1986 Cadillac Fleetwood that I had bought for $600. And I love it to this very day. I'm so grateful for that car because I bought it as is, and it had 120 original miles on it. And you know what? I didn't have much money back then. And dude, it never broke down on me. It never like faltered. It never did anything. And even till the day I sold it, I was just like, oh, wow, like you just never let me down. Thank you. Because that was my home for a little bit, you know, and I would drive back from the Bay. I would come. I drove a lot of miles on it, and it took me everywhere, and it kept me afloat. And but I refused to go back to the crime life. I refused to go back to the gang at this moment. So I ended up homeless because I couldn't go back to my family. See, because I believed that my family was just like look down upon me. The situation with my brother, where he's in the military, and he's like high standard to my family, and he's just like put me down to everybody, and I just like let everybody go. I let everybody down, and I think at this moment in my life, I just felt like a burden. I just felt like a burden, and I didn't want to call home to my innocent family and be like, "Oh, help me again," because your dysfunctional brother can't get it together, you know. And I think all these things were just continuously playing in my head, and that's what led to like me hitting rock bottom. You know what I'm saying? And led to that, to like me being homeless in my car.
And then you did a tattoo on somebody.
No, what do you mean? Tattoo on somebody?
Well, when you were kind of down, right? Didn't you do a tattoo on someone and the response was so overwhelmingly positive?
Yeah, well, I think I know the story you're talking about. And that's like something I learned as I went on. But no, really in that moment, you know, that moment where I was homeless is where the moment where when I was homeless in that moment, and I just like reached a moment in my life where I just couldn't do it anymore. And I think with the ADD, it was just nonstop like blame and just worry and anxiety,
Yeah.
shame, so much shame and burden, and just nonstop. And I was just like couldn't take it. I was going crazy, and I just broke down crying. And I remember this night, like I had to go went and did a tattoo. That was what was keeping me alive. The fact that I could tattoo. And luckily, I like go to the gym every day. I had clothes. I go to the gym every day. I'd shower at the gym. I brush my teeth. You know, so I didn't look like a homeless dude, but I was homeless. I didn't have anything. I couldn't even leave the state of California without getting put back into prison because that was one of the stipulations. So I had to figure it out. And I was lying to my PO, and I was so close to getting off this. I was like, I can't just ruin this right now. You know what I'm saying? Like I've gone this far and I'm like homeless. And if my PO would have found out at that moment, they would have just locked me back up. So now I'm just like freaked out, you know? And I just, the one night, and this is the night I ended up sharing with Dr. Clint. I just was coming home, just like dreaded. And had been raining all day. I looked like I did tattoos. I had some money, but that wasn't it. I got some food. And I went and I pulled into this like old abandoned restaurant area, and I knew I could park in the back, you know. And there was a guy holding a sign. It was a homeless dude holding a sign, which is really big out there. You know, it's a lot of homeless people, and I see it happening really big in our like it's just a big thing happening all over the nation. I think, you know, a lot of homelessness now. But I remember seeing him where a lot of times when I saw homeless people, I just ignore them because I just didn't want my energy to interact with theirs. You know what I mean? And I was judging them. You know what I'm saying? For sure. But in this moment where I was all broken down and just not feeling right, I remember turning the corner and he's standing there and he's looking at me because he's hoping I give him money, you know what I'm saying? Or something like read the sign, read my sign. And there's this moment my car paused. I think there was someone in front of me. There was like another car in front of me waiting for somebody. And I just like locked eyes with him, you know? And he was probably hoping that I would give him money. But what happened was I saw myself in him. I saw myself. I knew it, that I was not that far from that man holding that sign. That all I needed to do was just make some of the very similar choices that he had made in his life, and I would be there. And I knew it. I saw it. I knew how that happens to people. Because if you burn your bridges in life and you end up in a new area, like I was in a new area, I didn't know anybody there. I didn't have friends. I didn't grow up there. And all of a sudden, you don't have any resources. You could be the dude on the street very easily. That happens. I realize that now. And I remember I pulled back into the back and I just cried, dude. And I was so full of blame. I was like, dude, what? I've been trying so hard to I tried to explain, like in my mind, there was this like my table that I had to sit at. And this table had just this pile of all these things that my goal and ambition to come out of prison was to fix and to clear, to make everything right with my family and to be good and maybe start a family and find an amazing woman to have children with or something, you know, I had all these things, you know, that I thought I was going to do, and I couldn't. And I realized that then I had gotten to this point now where I realized that my dreams were not going to manifest. And this is what like just like irked me. I wasn't going to fix the story with my family. I wasn't going to fix the past. I wasn't going to make myself into the better person because I didn't know how. I didn't know how. And in this moment, I just like was like, dude, God, take my life. Like, please just fucking take me. And I remember like I'm so grateful that like along the way, I had studied like Tony Robbins stuff. I had studied Tony Robbins stuff, and he talked about a victim mind state. And I studied different mind states, and I always wondered like what kind of mind state. And I always choose my mind state, right? But that's not per se the mind state I actually had. You know what I mean? But the best mind state out there is the mind state I'd say I have. But anyways, yeah. But anyways, learning about a victim mind state, I learned that there was no gratitude, and there was no gratitude in a victim mind state, and that they were full of blame, and that at any time that you could stop a victim in their tracks, you could stop them with the "What are you grateful for?" And I don't know why that stuff, but there's so much to this, because I was in this moment in the car, I was scenario playing how I could die. I was like, a cop could pull up right now. And I was like, I dare a cop to pull up right now in my mind, you know, because if he did, I'm going to freak out. He's going to kill me, and he's going to have my life on his hands. And then my family will feel bad for me, and everybody else will feel bad for me because I just got cut down by a cop. And I don't know why in this depression, it was like, because I had such a bang against authority that's like, yeah, let a cop kill me senselessly, you know what I'm saying? And so I could be the victim of the system, you know, or
Seriously, that's about as victim mentality as you can get. Wow.
yeah. And for some reason, in that moment, I was like, hold on. If I got killed by a cop, I don't like authority. I get that. I don't like cops, because especially, you know, being in the prison and all that, I didn't like cops, right? But if I got killed by a cop, would that not make me a victim of a cop? Like, wait, hold up. I'm like, I don't want to be no victim of no cop. I don't even like those guys. I'm not gonna be a victim of them. No, wait. I was like, whoa. And then the gratitude thing, and this is so crazy, because I actually grew up LDS. For a lot of people who don't know, I grew up Mormon, you know what I'm saying? And when I was a child, I hate to even say to categorize this, because I did not learn gratitude from no religion. I want to say, yes, religion preaches gratitude, but the power of gratitude that I will talk about today, the point that we are getting to, did not come from religion. It came from going through the fire. You know what I mean? And so, but in this, every time I thought of gratitude up to this point, because I didn't practice gratitude, you have to understand this. It was always something that like religion had kind of like, be thankful. And you had all these yappy like guys, oh, you just gotta be thankful, you know? And so it's like, shut up, positive Polly. You don't even know what type of life this is. You know what I mean? That was like the mindset, you know? And I was like, but there was this song that I learned as a kid that was a primary song, which is weird because they don't even actually teach their children how to do this properly. So, because they never taught me as a primary kid. I just want to put that out there. But it goes like this: count your many blessings, name them one by one, count them many blessings, see what God has done. Well, that you need to take that song literal, like literal. You actually have to physically write down your blessings every day. And so I literally pulled out a bit. I was like, oh my gosh. And this is where it hit me. And that song, like, because every time I thought of gratitude, I thought of that song from my childhood, right? So right, even in this craziness, I thought of count your many. And I was like, what am I grateful for? And literally, because I had been crying and in my head, like it was a whole show going on. You know what I'm saying? The second I asked what I was grateful for to myself, everything went, and I was like, even my emotion was gone. I was like, I don't think I'm grateful for anything. There was no tears to it. I literally couldn't think of anything at that moment. And I was like, oh my goodness. And then I thought of it. I was like, if you asked me what my problems were in my life, I would start crying again. I would just go into that whole little circle that I just did in the car, the scenarios and my problems. Are you fucking serious? Do you not see me sleeping in the streets? Like, I could just give it to you with full passion. But I thought about that. I was like, dude, I could give you all my problems with full passion. Like I could get a clapping applause for it. But yet if you ask me for something grateful, I'm like monotone, no emotion. I have nothing to say. And the reason for that is because I never thought of anything. My muscle for that direction was gone. And I was like, oh my gosh, I am one-sided. I'm like, holy shit. And I think it was just an epiphany of some sort. So I pulled out a piece of paper and I'm like, come on, Levi, you can do this. Because I knew I had to do it from emotion. So I'm like, what am I grateful for? What am I grateful for? And I started to get into it, you know? And then I was like, well, shoot, man, I'm grateful for, dude, I'm really grateful I'm not holding a sign out there, you know, and that I have this car. And the first three things, I'm really grateful that I have clothes, because I actually had nice clothes on. You know, I had like a nice starter jacket and I didn't look like a homeless guy or anything. But then it's when I started to get a little bit deeper, and ultimately I said, dude, I love my smile. I love my smile because I always had a really good smile. And I love that I still have that, because a lot of these dudes that are broken don't got no smile anymore. And then their teeth are all like just disgusting. So I'm like, yo, you know what I mean? And so I was grateful that I wasn't there. But yet when I said that, I said it with I said it inside, and it was just enough to like, I just started to bawl. But this time I wasn't crying because I was just like, I can't deal with life. I was just crying. I was just like releasing or something. I was just crying, and I just went to sleep. I went to sleep, and it wasn't until I woke up in the morning, and I had the most soundest sleep. And when I woke up in the morning, dude, all I could, as I was telling Dr. Clint, you know, the very first thing, almost simultaneously, was I noticed the sun peering through the window, and literally dust particles flying through the sun. Now, why I say that is because that's how still my mind was. There was no thought. I woke up and I could hear the birds singing, and I was like, oh, the birds are chirping. And it was the first time that like my mind had went quiet, because whatever I did in counting my blessings and crying that out, it released just the repetitiveness of craziness. And I had this moment where God would say God, or people would say like, you felt the presence of love. And I was so happy. And I got up and I was like, oh my gosh, like I felt like 1,000 pounds, like I just got released from prison or something. And I was like, dude, if I can stay happy, if I can do this, if I can feel like this for the rest of my life, this is how I want to feel. And I remember I like started my car and I drove down the freeway. It was like blaring music, and I was so happy, you know. And that was the starting journey of me counting my blessings. You know, that was the starting of me counting my blessings. And I had to put the blinders on. And I had to be like, because my mind naturally wanted to go back to a negative focus. It naturally wanted to go back to what it was. But because I knew of what I experienced, I knew that there was a power in that. And I started to only focus on what I could, and I started to find things in everything, even in like the green light, or the, you know, like the easiness of finding a parking spot, or like sometimes you have to get really petty, because if you don't, you'll fall off the wagon, you know. But you just have to get really petty. It's all, they say you have to become a delusional optimist, because yeah, you have to consider everything good happening, even when it's just insane, right?
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, but I have to tell you though, right? That wasn't the ultimate key, because even though I was only focused on counting my blessings, I was expecting good things to happen from the exterior in, because I was still this person who had fucked up his life before. You see, I was still this person. I was counting my blessings, that still felt that if I don't get my shit together, I couldn't go return to my family, because I'll only be a burden. So I'll only be a burden to them, and I'll have to borrow money or get a ride or something. So I got to put my life together. And I knew that the path of gratitude and counting my blessings was good, but there was something missing. there was something missing. And 2 years went down. And yes, in those 2 years, my whole life changed. And by the end of the 2 years, it was going to be my first time that I was going to go home for Christmas. And I hadn't seen my family. And I was so excited. I had developed enough confidence that I was going to go home. I looked good. I had new clothes on. I had a little bit of money in my pocket. I even had some gifts. And I hadn't seen my family in about 4 years at that time, you know? And this is going to be one of the first Christmases that I was going to spend with them. And so I was so excited, but I was so full of fear because I didn't know if they truly loved me. You know, I didn't know if I was going to be a burden, like, oh, here he is, everybody put the snow on, you know, he won't be here for long or something, you know? And I remember I drove all the way home, which was like 12 hours. So I drove home and I pulled to my brother's house. I was like, all right, I got in there and I walked in and I knocked on the door and they're like, come in. And because there's all the families there, right? And I walk in and a lot of them didn't know I was coming. Only my mom and dad knew. And I guess they didn't even say, my older brother knew too. But when I walked in, like the whole house exploded. They were so happy to see me. They were so excited to see me. And I remember my little nephew, and I was like taken back. I was like, hey, everybody, like, oh my gosh, you look so good. We haven't seen you in so long. Like, where have you been? Where have you been? And I remember my little nephew, he was probably like, probably like 5, right? 5 to 6. And my niece, she was like 7. You know, they were really close to each other, maybe even 5, 6, okay? And she comes up, her name's Samantha. She's like, Levi, Uncle Levi, oh my gosh. She's like, hey, I got a painting set. So they were able to open one present like on Christmas Eve. And they all opened up a present together that was for all the kids. And it was all a bunch of painting stuff, right? And everybody knows that I'm an artist. So they're like, they wanted to show me what they painted. And as we made it around from the living room into the other room, I saw my little nephew there. He had like a little painter's hat. He had little paints and he was doing a painting. I was like, oh my gosh, it's so good. I remember laughing. She's like, Uncle Levi, come see my painting. You know, and she had drawn it on a regular piece of paper. And I remember when I picked it up, she's like, yeah, this is what I painted earlier. And it was all in different colors. And it had the mountains. And it was just like the typical kid drawing. It had the house. And then it had every family member and every pet, you know. And it had like birds. And it had the dog and the cat, the family cat. And she had written 3 words on top of it that changed my life forever. It was the missing link to what I was looking for. And you know what those 3 words were? I love my life. Oh. And I realized at that moment that what I was seeking for came from here, and that I had to forgive myself for the journey that I had. I had so much to be in love with that I just need to love my life. And it was through that I was able to let go of everything I did in my past, because you can't fix the past. You can only determine what the future is going to hold. And through that, man, my whole life has changed. I've become a world-renowned artist. I fly, I travel everywhere. I just got back from Nepal, but that wasn't a tattoo trip, even though I made it into one. But I've really made my family proud, you know, and I do have to say though that like it is a constant practice, you know, it is a constant practice. We live in a world that sometimes it don't even make no sense to us, you know. It only makes sense to be negative and, you know, do what your parents taught you. You know, my dad, he came home and complained about his job every day of his of my childhood. I even know to this day the name of his boss that he hated, you know, like, and it was 30 years ago, 35 years ago, and I still remember it just because it like seared in, you know. And I didn't learn gratitude from my father, but I learned to be grateful from all my experiences and to forgive everything, you know what I'm saying? Because one thing that Tony Robbins did teach me, and one thing he said that in this life, we are trained, we've all come down with purpose, and people have to wear the mask to teach you. Someone has to teach you hate, someone has to teach you deceit, someone's going to teach you love, someone's going to teach you hurt. And it might be a family member, like my brother, you know, like I felt so betrayed, but I realized something, that I am so strong that the universe knows that it would need somebody that had access to my heart to break it open. So I use my brother, you know, and if I know this and I believe in this, well, then I can forgive him and I can be grateful for the role he played, because I am who I am today. I am who I am today, and I'm so grateful for that. I'm powerful now.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are incredibly powerful. I want to tell everybody, first of all, Levi, you cracked my heart open yet again. And I think that's true for all of us. And I really want to thank you. I just want to open things up here for a minute, 1 second. So when we were just out in Sedona, we were asked to share our passion projects. And so, if somebody had a book or somebody had a program or whatever, they got up and I, talked about my trips and whatever. We each had a minute, and we did it in two different times. One group went one day and the next group went the next day. And Levi went towards the end of the second day, which was our last day there. And Levi got up, and his passion project was just basically to spread love in the world, to walk in love, to be love, to radiate love. I'm paraphrasing, but he was so passionate about standing for love. And I thought, well, there really isn't a passion project better than that. And you were just so on fire. And to hear your story and to know where you are now. And by the way, when we caught up in Sedona, I found out that when Levi got back, he had a whole crew that worked at his tattoo parlor, and basically everybody up and left all at once, and that was quite a big sea change. But Levi really took the lessons from it and turned it around. And what I want to focus on now, just for a few minutes, and then I want to open up the floor to anybody who wishes to ask a question or make a comment. But you already mentioned forgiveness twice. First and foremost, of yourself, and then of your family, of your brother, of basically my hunch is, and correct me if I'm wrong, you've had to forgive many people along that storyline.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
And do you want to talk a little bit about your process of forgiveness, or is it something you can actually put into words?
Yeah, it's definitely something I can put into words, because especially when the see for me, it was changing the mindset, because anytime that you cannot forgive somebody, you have to, like, if you reverse engineer it, you can definitely see that you're still hurt by the pain of it, right? The problem, and because of it, and because of that, I don't want to lose my focus here, because I want to make sure I give the most valuable thing. Because of that, because of the hurt of the pain, you're holding a certain mindset, which kind of holds you in a victimization of it. That's the problem, is that we hold ourselves in the victimization, and we feel like this, okay? This is what we feel like. We feel like if we let go of what this person did to us, then we make it okay for what they did to us, and then we'll do it again. Okay, so this is exactly it. But this is the key. This is the secret, right? That forgiveness is not for that person. For the key, the magic of forgiveness is only for you, because it is only you that become poisoned with emotion and regret and hate every time you think of this person. So you continually poison yourself by reminiscing on the scenario of whatever it is, whatever the situation is. So when you forgive this person, you do not forget, you do not let go. But now when they bring up certain people in my life, there's not an emotional response. There's not poison that fills my body and knocks me off my horse, because I'm going this way. I can't go back. I can't go back and I can't hold on to that. So understanding that is been a big thing for myself right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Who did you learn that from? Do you know?
Yes. So I learned that from learning how to forgive my brother, because my brother is a very like cynical, like we're all on our own journey, you know, and like being in the military and being higher up in the military, you pick up habits of like where you're demoting people. I don't know what that is. Toxic masculinity, you can say whatever.
It's very hierarchical.
I can't change his path, okay? But I cannot allow him to poison my life anymore. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I need to forgive. And if I'm to forgive, you're not going to be able to bring him up and I get all up into my emotions anymore. Hold on, you know what I'm saying? And so now you bring up my brother. I actually gave his name to the Agori to bless him, you know, because that's my mom's son. But I'm not going to lie, he's not allowed in my front seat of my movie. You know what I'm saying? So,
Yes.
but on top, he's just not. He has to go through his journey. But I don't have to hate him. I can love him from over here. Matter of fact, I did. Behind his back, I gave his name to the glory. I gave all my family though, but for the blessing. But he got it too. He got that. And there was such a healing spot right there when we were in the front of the glory. Because it's like, am I going to put his name down? Because see, if I was holding on to what I was holding on to, I couldn't. And mind you, I have to tell you something. I'm a very family-oriented dude. So when my brother, I felt like my brother backstabbed me, it was like the ultimate cross that you could ever do. So like the hate you have for someone, let's say if you've ever had hate for someone in your life and you never let it go, I probably had that for my brother times 10, because I felt like you were a person that would hurt family. So I hate him more than you would just hate your average person. Do you understand what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
that's why. So for me to work through this was very hard. Like it took a lot of work. It took a lot of work. It took many different actual healing episodes. It wasn't just like one time and it was done. No, it was a couple times. I had to release that, release it. Like it was embedded into me, you know what I mean? And so, but ultimately though is I think like one of the things that we've learned is knowing what you want. You know, it's about knowing your why so much that you're able to forgive, you know, like, why are you here? What direction are you going? You know, what, and examining yourself. And I think it's self-reflection. You know, one of the biggest things of forgiveness is self-reflection, because what did you have to go through for you to be you? You know what I'm saying? And if you had to go through this type of fire, you don't have to hate fire, you know, you don't have to hate it, not especially if you had to go through it, maybe you can embrace it then. That's the Agori path. That's the Agori path.
Let me explain for those who aren't familiar with that word. This is a holy man, basically, in Nepal. And we had an Agori lead us through a practice, a release practice, and it was quite powerful. So that's what you're talking about. You gave your family to that process. Yeah, you know, we talk about forgiveness as being the hot coal that if you don't do it, it's the hot coal in your own pocket. It's not in the other person's pocket. It's in your pocket, burning away, you know. But I really love how you speak about, you know, it's not a once and done thing. It's a process that's many layered, and that is been my experience as well. And but keeping the focus of how I want to be. What do I want to be? I want to be free of this feeling. I want to be unburdened by this resentment or this pain or whatever. Yeah, no, it wasn't nice. It wasn't right. And on top of that, we can even add that little extra piece, which is on some level, this is one of the hurdles that I set up for myself in this lifetime. I obviously needed a big fat frying pan on my head to learn whatever this particular piece is about. I wanted to wake up to an aspect of myself, and I obviously couldn't do it nicely. You know, it needed to be a frying pan. And so it's it's really, I consider it and I haven't sent it to you, but I will send it to you. I send it to my list at the beginning of the month. There's a forgiveness practice, and I won't go too far into it right now, but it came to me in one of the most profound otherworldly experiences I've ever had. And I came to understand through that, and that particular process of forgiveness, which is so complete that actually people have gotten it done once by doing the practice once. But it's so complete, and it taught me that forgiveness is really, if you had a ladder rung of spiritual practices, it would be the top rung. It's the big kahuna of spiritual practice, in my opinion. So, Levi, I want to just ask, we've got a few more minutes, and I just want to see if anybody would like to share anything or ask any questions of this beautiful, courageous man.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you, Hope. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, you're just something else. I love you so much, and I'm very
Yeah,
happy our paths have crossed.
yes.
And I know Beverly feels the same way.
Yes, I love Beverly.
Yeah,
Beverly.
she adores you. For good reason. Karen, did you want to say something?
Well, I have a question. And I think I wanted to, well, it's a question, but I also know that I heard it in the story. So well shared. Was there the moment prior to, because we ended with the forgiveness of the brother and the forgiveness of the other as the thing that we need to do. But what was there the point in there where the forgiveness of yourself came first?
So yes.
Was that in a specific
Order?
yes, the order. And also, was it like once? What got that once and then? I don't know, maybe I'm being too nitty gritty, but just that I hear that so often of.
Yeah, no, you know what it is it's realization. So it's realization. So realizing, so when I realized that the love had to come from within and that I no longer had to hold these things against me. Yes. So through that realization, I was able to forgive myself. Now, moving down the path, like even a month later or the next week later, do I start catching myself with negative self-talk? Sometimes. And this is where I'm like, no. And then so it is a constant self-forgiveness, because a lot of it is like it's stuck. It is embedded into our subconscious to blame ourselves for things, to be hard on ourselves, to say you were supposed to do this, but yet you didn't do this. You know what I mean? And that is like trying to limit that or cut that out, because the thing is falling in love. Yes, 100% is forgiving yourself for your limitations and becoming and looking to become your own best friend. That's what it is. Because even if reason why I say best friend, your best friend could do wrong. She's still your best friend. You know, as a matter of fact, when my best friend did wrong, I would go do wrong with him. I was like, I'm going to get in trouble with you. That's how much I was with my best friend. And so in this forgiveness of yourself is learning how to be your own best friend, to have your own back. And there's many tools that I've done. And one of them, I would say really fast, is write a personal letter to yourself. And there's only one rule that you can do that, is when you write it, for example, I'll write it, Dear Levi, and I will start, hey, I just, I'm writing you this letter because I want to tell you how proud I am about you. And so you can only write it from the mindset of a best friend, the one that no matter what you do, you can never do wrong. Like one of those best friends, and that's who you have to be for yourself. And I write yourself the letter and cry your eyes out, because that's what I do every time I write myself the letter. So. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Anybody else want to chime in here? Fiona.
What a shining light you are. It's just so amazing to think of somebody coming through that much darkness and blackness and mafia and heroin and prison. And, it's just so amazing to see you and your smile shining through it all. It's like to forgive myself. I haven't done all of that, you know, but I mean, but, and yet I make it so hard.
Yes.
And so just honestly, the tasks that you set yourself to come through all that shit, to be doing what you're doing is just mind-blowing. Thank you so much for sharing it. It's really inspiration.
Thank you so much. That means a lot. That means a lot. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Fiona. Beverly, did you want to chime in here?
Yes, I did. First of all, your story always amazes me, Levi, but the person that you are today, you are amazing.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Beverly. Oh man.
I love you.
I love you. You know, I had this moment with Beverly where we were in Nepal, and she just came up to me and she told me, I just want to tell you how proud I am of you. And it felt like something I need to hear from someone like Beverly, a mother who had been through so much as well, and bringing children forth. And I just want to say thank you so much, Beverly. Yeah.
Well, your message also comes from another place too, Levi. The importance of parents.
Yes.
To keep the candle burning, keep the hope there, and always to keep the forgiveness, because there is joy and there is possibility.
Yes. Thank you so much, Beverly.
Thank you.
Mm. Beautiful, beautiful. Mm. Love you guys. Miss you guys. Wish we lived closer together.
I do too. Starbucks would be a nice place to hang out with.
Yeah, let's go do that.
Well,
Anybody else want to say anything before we wrap this up? Well, I feel so enthused speaking with you, Levi, and reflecting on your amazing story. And listen, there's always a home for you with us. And so, chime in on a Monday and join us for a meditation sometime, because we would love to see you again.
All right. I would love to.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, much love to you. Much love to everybody who showed up tonight and those who will watch this video. And I know there will be a lot of them. So signing off.
Yes. Thank you. Bye, guys.
Night, everybody.
Bye.